From the heart of downtown Manhattan and the center of New York City's government, New York Law School's City Law Breakfast Series is proud to present a very special guest, Neil deGrasse Tyson, astrophysicist and director of the Hayden Planetarium, with the presentation, Bringing the Universe Down to Earth. This program was videotaped at New York Law School, April 14th, 2000.
Welcome to the sixth City Law Breakfast of this academic year. We're delighted to welcome you back. The lights are a bit dimmer today because we're going to have a computer show as part of the talk, so that's why the lights are a bit lower than normal. I'm Ross Sandler, Professor of Law and Director of the Center for New York City Law, and I welcome all of you to New York Law School. Today, we're delighted to have Neil Tyson speak to us here at New York Law School. He is the director of the Hayden Planetarium, which has been fabulously rebuilt at the American Museum of Natural History, and if you have not seen it, you should go promptly there to see what a wonderful new building has been built and a wonderful new planetarium. Neil Tyson is the director of the museum. He is a product of New York City, went to the Bronx High School of Science, where he early knew what he wanted to do. He had an astrophysics emphasis. That's hard to say. He went on to Harvard University, again in physics, then to Texas for a master's in physics, and then ultimately at Columbia University, where he got his PhD in astrophysics. And his research area, I love this, is galactic bulge, something that we may all have to worry about. He has published an enormous amount of literature on astrophysics, both for popular reading for students and for scientists. He sometimes writes under the pseudonym of Merlin in books that have been translated and published around the world. His latest book is The Sky is Not the Limit, The Life and Rumination of an Urban Astrophysicist, and it's a wonderful read and it's a wonderful story. He is the Frederick P. Rose Director of the Hayden Planetarium. I just mentioned Fred Rose, some of you may have known, was a wonderful New Yorker whose name is on important structures at the Public Library, at the Lincoln Center, and at the American Museum of Natural History, and he passed away just this past summer, and we miss him. But the ideas that he had and the influence he had at the museum and the help that he gave, leaving his name on both the center and on the chair that Neil Tyson holds, is a wonderful memory of him. But we are delighted today to welcome Neil Tyson, the director of the Hayden Planetarium. Yeah.
Thank you, Ross. I didn't know if this was usual or unusual to give a presentation off of the laptop in this room, so forgive me if it sent you on a loop there. I've got about 15 or 20 slides that I want to share with you that in part chronicle our efforts to try to bring the universe down to Earth, into New York City, and into Manhattan. Let me lead off by saying that the Hayden Planetarium itself, got its original name from Charles Hayden. Charles Hayden was a philanthropist in the 1920s and 30s, and he, just getting my signal back. That's all I need, thanks. He had just visited Europe and seen this brand new technology invented by the Carl Zeiss company, where they were able to take what was previously a room with holes punched in the ceiling with flashlights outside of that, where you'd walk inside this room and see the night sky, but then how would you see another night sky? Well, you have to walk into another room where a different assortment of holes were punched into the ceiling. And what Carl Zeiss managed to do was to automate that entire process and create what we now know to be the modern day planetarium. And let's see, here we go. Okay. So there he goes, good old Charles Hayden, looking very tweedy in his bow tie. So he had money in the early 1930s, no doubt because of some shrewd investments that got him through the crash. But in any event, he had come back from Europe, donated $500,000 to the museum. The museum forked up an equivalent amount of money through raising money through bonds. And to do that, they created what was known then and even known today as the Hayden Planetarium Authority. It became a municipal entity enabling the institution to raise money. And in that effort, for $1.2 million, the first Hayden Planetarium was built. And there it was. This is what it looked like a few years ago. That's the north side of the American Museum of Natural History. And we see here the Hayden Planetarium sort of tucked into the back. There's a surface level parking, a park outside here. The entrance that we all remember as the front of the museum is right over here, with Teddy Roosevelt standing tall out front on Central Park West. Well, what has happened if you haven't been up on 81st Street lately, in the past several months, or if you've been living under a rock, let me explain to you what has happened. This entire side of the museum looks really different from this picture. The Hayden Planetarium is completely rebuilt. It is now contained within the Rose Center for Earth and Space. This surface level parking is now submerged, and there's a terrace right now under construction that will be available for use come early summer. There's a whole other entrance onto Columbus Avenue, and all this is being redone out here. It's still being worked on, but the Rose Center for Earth and Space is ready and built, ready for you to visit. We pre-sold tickets before we opened, and we pre-sold over 100,000 seats. And so there's been tremendous demand to see the opening space show and to visit the institution. The first week, there were 21,000 people a day came to the institution. Contrast that with an average daily attendance of 7,000 or 8,000. And on a busy day, it might get to 15,000, 17,000. So we are exceeding all of our high-end expectations. Let's take a closer look. The Hayden Planetarium, let me back up just one moment. The original plan for the American Museum of Natural History, the original master plan laid down by the architects in the middle part of the 19th century, provided for the museum to actually occupy this entire block. I mean, it's multiple blocks, of course, because it extends from 77th Street to 81st Street and across two avenues. But the original plan was to continue these major structures all the way up to 81st Street, original as in 1870s plans, and then across 81st Street and then back. And in doing that, when the Hayden Planetarium concept came up, the question was, well, how do we fit a building such as this in the corridors that had been imagined for the master plan of the institution? And in fact, that was not possible. So they said, well, we can't build it inside either the pre-existing building or any extension in the master plan. Let us plunk it down into what is one of 4 courtyards that would have remained once the master plan was finished. Because the master plan was going to be a big square of buildings crossed midway east, west, and north, south with more corridors, leaving 4 courtyards. So the Hayden Planetarium was plunked inside of a courtyard. And what that meant was the original architects knew very well, or fully expected, can you see, I'm sorry here, they fully expected that the Hayden Planetarium would one day be completely enclosed within the facility. And so, therefore, the actual building was rather ordinary brick with very little ornament compared with other buildings of its own generation. The Adler Planetarium in Chicago was built 4 years before the Hayden. The Griffith Observatory and Planetarium in Los Angeles, that was built 2 or 3 years before the Hayden. Those are sort of architectural monuments. The one in Adler is sitting out on a wharf or jetty from Chicago, and we all know the one at Adler is up on the mountain. This was a rather ordinary brick building that had an Art Deco facade right here, because the architects knew, well, Well, they don't know when we're going to finish the master plan in their mind, so they said we got to give it some kind of entrance. So this little section here was an Art Deco add-on to give it an entrance, and that's what you see in this next picture. That's this piece. So most people remember when they think of the Hayden Planetarium, they think of this view, which is front end. And my office used to be right here inside these two windows there, behind these bars there. So anyhow, let me give you a sense of the legacy of the Hayden Planetarium. I grew up in New York City. My first night sky was the night sky of the Hayden Planetarium. And of course, I thought it was a hoax because I knew how many stars there should be in the night sky. There are 14 stars in the night sky. I'd seen them from the Bronx, and I walked into the Hayden Planetarium. There were like thousands of stars in the night sky. So I was dumbstruck by this fact. Well, I thought it was a hoax until much later when I went to mountaintops and things, and I saw that in fact the Hayden was telling the story correctly. In fact, to this day, I have the privilege of observing the universe from some of the finest mountaintop observatories in the world, and when I go to those mountaintops and I stand up there and look up to the sky, I swear to you, this is sickeningly urban to think this, but I look up and I say, it reminds me of the Hayden Planetarium. I'm an urban child, I confess, okay? Forgive me for this, but it's really true. When I was a kid, I took courses at the Hayden Planetarium. Once I saw my first night sky there, I was hooked. I was 9 years old. I was hooked. I've known since then what I wanted to do with my life. But rather quickly, you say, okay, I've seen the night sky, but what more is there to the universe? And so I started taking courses that were offered at the Hayden Planetarium. And I have here reproduced my first course certificate that was given to me for completing a course, Advanced Topics in Astronomy for Young People. And this tells you my age here. I got this in 1969, and I was 11 years old. This is the then head of the Hayden Planetarium, Franklin Brandley. And I show this, I don't know how good that reproduction is. Yeah, you can't see it too well. In the back of this is a sort of a silhouette ghost image of the front of the Hayden Planetarium. So there's the dome. It doesn't show up too well on this reproduction. My point of showing you this is that one of my greatest privileges is that as head of the planetarium now, I sign these certificates for people taking the course today. All right? And I've got my overpriced fountain pen for just that purpose. And my secretary said, we can make a rubber stamp for you. I said, nope. One of the last privileges of office is signing these certificates because they were signed when I was a kid. So here's a modern certificate. And there's my signature right there, okay? This didn't duplicate well on the copy. But anyhow, it's slightly modified. We're going to have yet a third version of this to reflect the new architecture. But basically, I get weepy when I do this for every certificate that I sign. So I just want to alert you to the fact that the city institutions can and do work if I am any evidence of this. Let's go on to one other point. At the original Hayden Planetarium, I want to impress upon you that what made it a significant place was not what it looked like, was not the name so much, because in fact the Hayden Planetarium was the fourth planetarium in the United States. It was not the first. It was not even the most interesting looking. And there it was tucked in the backyard of a major institution. So how could it be so famous so quickly? And it was famous quickly. I have in my archives from 40 years ago a letter addressed from Europe, and it says, Planetarium USA. That's all it says, and it was delivered to the Hayden Planetarium. Okay? So you got to be a significant place when the post office says there's only one place this can be, and that's the Hayden. So the very first year, the Hayden Planetarium actually had a staff of PhD astronomers and astrophysicists. Back then, they were known principally as astronomers. But what it meant was you could have an exhibition facility that could express the frontier of cosmic discovery in its day. because there were people there who engaged in cosmic discovery. That was not true for other planetariums across the country. Other planetariums, they said, oh, what a great idea, let's build one. So they build one. You hire a few people who can point out the night sky, identify some constellations, retell some legends, and then that was it. So then what happens when, we discover that the universe is expanding, or black holes and quasars and the search for life? What do you do? In fact, nothing. You just keep pointing out the night sky. Whereas at the Hayden, the staff enabled it. And by the way, to sustain such a staff, it was not by accident. The fact is, we're part of a major institution that has a legacy of supporting scientific research. If you did not otherwise know, the American Museum of Natural History has two branches. There's the exhibition branch, and that's what most people think and know of it. But then there's the academic branch, where we have over 200 scientists conducting active research in their various disciplines. So my point of this is, the very first year it was open, a magazine was launched called The Sky. All right? And I don't have the second page here, but if you open this up, it would say The Sky, Bulletin of the Hayden Planetarium, Magazine of Cosmic News. And in there were articles. This is 1936. In there were the articles. One article was, To the Moon via Rocket? Question mark? And there's analysis of whether you can do this. And there was a discussion of the role of sunspots in the weather and the climate that was going on in the recent days. And so there were articles that brought you to the frontier of our knowledge and understanding of space and the universe. Well, this magazine later on merged with another magazine called The Telescope to become Sky and Telescope magazine, which is available on almost all newsstands if you've ever seen it. And it's the preeminent magazine of backyard astronomy today. And I just want to alert you to the fact that it owes its roots to the basement of the Hayden Planetarium. Well, let's go take a look at what the facility looks like now. I don't know if you can see that. We've got, maybe I can raise this up just a bit. Thanks. This is the same footprint, the same architectural footprint as that's good. That's good, thank you. The same architectural footprint as the original Hayden that you saw a couple of pictures ago, but this is now what it looks like. This happens to be a photorealistic rendering, which means today that there are a lot of watercolor artists out of a job, because the computer-assisted design programs used by architects and designers now flows right into programs that paint up the picture using photographs of real scenes. So this is like a real tree, but laced into the computer rendering of the facility. Let me note for you that actual photographs of this, as impressive as this is as it's something to look at, actual photos look much better, and I have a few coming up. There's a mixture of the photorealistic pictures as well as actual photos. But what we've done here is taken the dome of the Hayden and completed it into a sphere, and then enable you to see the sphere through this glass enclosure. Before I continue, let me tell you who we partnered with to accomplish this. There's Jim Polshek and Partners, the architect, known for many projects, among them the renovation of Carnegie Hall. Our exhibit designer was Ralph Applebaum and Associates. You may know him from the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. He also did the Newseum in Virginia, just outside of Washington, and he did our dinosaur halls, completed in the early 1990s. And so there's a collaboration of concept that went into this facility. And once we knew that to bring the frontier of cosmic discovery that we needed a new facility, once we came to that realization, then we had a blank slate. So we're all sitting around the table, and we say, well, what ideas can we put into this pot and have them grow and be the finest expression of our scientific vision, of an architectural vision, and of an exhibition vision? And this is what emerged from it. There are no wasted forms anywhere in this facility. You could point to anything. Say, well, what is that little? What? And I'll say, well, we thought about that, and that's there because, all right, little things like this arch that resonates with the arch that's on the 77th Street side of the museum. I don't know if you're museum fluent, with the fronts of the museum, but it resonates with that. We have a terrace off to the side here, which I will talk about in just a moment, where we have, and there's a dog run out here in the park. That's another conversation we can have about, here we are building the greatest monument to the universe ever conceived, and some fraction of our conversations was about the dog run out here. And so I said, well, by the way, I have a soft spot for dogs, only because my first telescope was purchased with revenue that I earned by walking other people's dogs. So however heated that debate got about do we continue to maintain the dog run that was there before in this newly designed park, I said, fine. I'd look at my first telescope and I say, where would I be today without the money from walking other people's dogs? So, I'm supposed to have a remote control for this. Let's see if this works. So I don't even have to stand there. And let's try this. Oops. What did I do? I did something. That's interesting. There we go. Okay. All right, we are now inside the facility. This is an actual photograph taken a couple of months ago, and you get a close-up view on this sphere, on the supports for the sphere. There's a journey you can take around the sphere. This embankment here is actually a pathway that comes out from the belly of the sphere. There's architectural form here that is all in the service of a scientific mission. What we've done is the original Space Theater is still there, still the Hayden. It's the Hayden. We don't call it the Sky Theater anymore, because what is the sky? It's just like what you see from Earth. The real universe occupies the full three-dimensionality of all of space, so it's now the Space Theater. The Hayden Space Theater is in the upper half. We've taken the belly of the sphere and turned it into a whole new venue, where we reproduce the first 3 minutes of the universe, the Big Bang. And out of that Big Bang, you exit, there's a portal here where you exit the Big Bang, and then you take this journey through time, having been hatched out of the beginning of time, descending down to a lower level, all 13 billion years of cosmic history. Well, that sphere, as architecturally pure as it is, I'm not so much impressed with it as architecture as I am with it as an exhibit icon, because if you look around the universe, most things in the universe have a spherical shape. Moons, planets, the halos of galaxies, even the observable universe. So if I got a sphere sitting in the middle of my place, then we can take that shape and use it as a reference to compare the relative sizes of things in the universe, and do it with a level of accuracy and integrity that further enriches the sense of the journey. So right here we have the planet Jupiter. The planet Jupiter, with its famous red spot sitting there. You see that little, see this there? It's a storm that's been raging ever since the time of Galileo. That's never gone away. It's this churning cauldron on the surface of this gaseous giant planet. Well, why is it that size? Jupiter's that size because it is the exact size Jupiter would be if this sphere were the sun. Then you realize first how big the sun is, but also, kind of how big Jupiter is compared with the sun. Well, if that's Jupiter, then how about some other planets? Well, mounted on the railing here, it's hard to see, is a little soccer ball-sized object. That's Earth. Then you learn how tiny Earth is compared with other things in the universe, other things even within our solar system. And really the whole point of the Rose Center is to make you feel small. If you walk in with as big an ego as you can imagine, you're leaving without it, I promise. This journey, we start you on the other side where the sphere is the observable universe. And every few steps you take, the relative sizes of things get smaller and smaller and smaller through the solar system zone. Then you come on down through moons, and then through rocks, and then through molecules, atoms, right on down to the atomic nucleus. And so it's a journey through the relative sizes of everything in the universe. And that journey it completely circumnavigates the sphere. Let's go. Oh, actually, these planets, we didn't hatch them out of, these were manufactured planets. And they were sort of, how do you find the person who makes these? You go in the yellow pages, you know, it's like, do you make 17-foot planets? Turns out there's a relatively well-known museum fabricator who's in Canada, and I think I put in some pictures of, what happened again? Okay, there we go. I think did I take those out? It follows this. I don't expect you to be able to read this because it's from a typewriter from 80 years ago, and plus the reproduction is poor. But I want to alert you to that exhibit, to some of the incentive we had for that exhibit. And then I'll show you some scenes from Canada. This is a letter to Professor Henry Osborne, American Museum, he was the director of the American Museum of Natural History. This letter is dated November 19th, 1915. It is from the head of the Department of Astrophysics at Princeton University, Henry Norris Russell. Henry Norris Russell had been invited to some function such as this back in a lunch or a dinner or something, some social function, and they got to chatting. And Henry Norris Russell said, I have an idea. You know what you should do? Because the museum didn't yet have an astronomy exhibit. He said, you should make an exhibit that compares the relative sizes of things in the universe. So here it says, your friendly interest in some of the ideas I spoke of the other day, blah, 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 for a series of models and drawings on successively smaller scales to illustrate astronomical distances and the like. And this goes on. And then he specs it out, each object being 1/100th the size of the previous one. And this goes on and on and on. This goes on and on and on, and he takes it through the scales of the solar system. Back then, Pluto was not yet known, so it's not mentioned here. Back then, we did not know about other galaxies. Other galaxies. All was known was the Milky Way and the stars within it. But he was clever, because he said, well, our knowledge is not complete. And he says here, this is as far as is possible to estimate distances at present, and probably goes into the Milky Way. He was talking about the most distant known stars. The visible stars and planetary and irregular nebulae lie within this region. The spiral nebulae, these are the spiral fuzzy things in the nighttime sky. We didn't know they were galaxies at the time. We didn't know they were whole other galaxies, like the Milky Way, spanning to the edge of the universe. He says the spiral nebulae are probably more remote than the stars of our galaxy. Then he goes on. So this is quite prescient. Then he goes on and said, let's extend this the other way, all the way down to the atom. And then he signs, very sincerely yours. My point is, we have reproduced this letter at the beginning of that exhibit. And he says, wouldn't it be great if your museum can do it? And we say, 85 years late, we did it. So here we are in Canada. Here is Jupiter suspended from a cable, and there's an airbrushed artist. This is about 11 feet in diameter. So if you stand up next to this, you come about this tall. And the airbrushed artist was there. These are all his tools. And it took, apparently he painted this in just a couple of weeks. I was quite impressed. I took several visits up there. It's outside of Toronto. Notice the date on this. This is just a couple of months ago. I don't know how good your memory is, but 5 years ago, a comet slammed into Jupiter and scarred the surface of Jupiter for several days. Comet Shoemaker-Levy. It was the first collision in the solar system ever witnessed. The collision on Jupiter was of a magnitude which, if that collision happened here on Earth, it would easily render human species extinct, just the way a similar collision 65 million years ago took out the dinosaurs. So we bore witness to the kind of collision that would be species-destroying here on Earth. It was a comet that broke into 24 pieces, and one after another, those 24 pieces slammed into Jupiter. Jupiter rotates relatively quickly, so after the first piece hit, when the second piece hit, Jupiter had already rotated, and so it hit in another spot. And so you could see the pockmarks all around the rotated surface of Jupiter. We don't really know what permanent damage it did to Jupiter, but we're pretty sure that Jupiter has no dinosaurs left, I think, is what that lesson is. Let's go inside the sphere. This is the Space Theater, showing the latest model, Zeiss. By the way, we didn't presume we would stick with the Zeiss. The time has gone come along quite a way since the 1930s. We started from scratch and said, what are the best projectors out there in the world? And once again, we landed on Zeiss. We went to Japan, went to Germany. This is the Zeiss Model 8. It looks very different from the one you might have remembered. One you might have remembered looked like a big bug in the middle of a big, giant, scary-looking bug. This is with the compression of technology and hardware. It's now in a single ball, a little more contained, and it's not really in the way anymore. It used to sort of get in your way when you were in the space theater. It has the capacity to project stars on the dome with such a precision that you can go in there with binoculars and see more with binoculars than you could with your naked eye. So once again, we've got the best sky New Yorkers will ever see. We felt we owed it to New Yorkers who never have an occasion to look up, that when they finally do look up, we want to give them the best darn sky possible. We also have a video projection system, which is hidden behind a cove there, that enables us to take a journey through those stars. So we can say, where do you want to go today? And, except we'll mean it, okay? And we'll say, there's the night sky for you, but now we take a joystick, lift ourselves off the surface of the Earth, the solar system recedes in the background, and then we journey among these stars. We have the entire Milky Way galaxy mapped out in three-dimensional coordinates with a project funded in part by NASA. They gave us money for our, what we call the Digital Galaxy Project. And so now we're no longer earthbound in our experience. Because in the old days it was, the question, where do you want to go today, was, well, where on Earth do you want to see the stars? You want to go to the southern hemisphere? You want to go to the North Pole? Do you want to see what the sky looked like 50 years ago on Earth? And all of this was sort of shifting the Earth. You want to see sunset, sunrise? It was shifting the sky. Now, of course, we can not only shift the sky, we can move through the sky, and hence the name Space Theater. This is a colleague of mine, Jim Schweitzer, who, as we move forward, well, first he's been with us for the past several years. He came in about a year into the project. He's quite pedigreed in this business. He spent 12 years at the Adler Planetarium in Chicago. Here we are, both of us kicking the tires of this in Germany. We're at the Zeiss headquarters. They don't even want to call it a planetarium anymore. It's a Universarium, okay? It's in Germany. And there we are posing, genuflecting next to this machine. It cost us about $4 million. I mean, it cost real money. Although, I took the original price of the projector in 1935 and then forward valued it, and it's about the same price. I mean, in terms of its impact on one's fundraising abilities. So it's consistent. So Jim Schweitzer, in fact, as we move forward, will actually be running the day-to-day functionings of the Hayden Planetarium. He's a PhD scientist turned educator, and so all of our educational programmings and most of the interface that will unfold between the institution and the educational community will happen through him. As we go forward, I will put back on my scientist hat, although retaining the title director of the Hayden, and I will be combing the frontier of cosmic discovery and bringing that cosmic discovery into the house. And then I sort of hand it over to the educators, and they figure out innovative ways to bring it to the visitor and to take it beyond the walls. Just have a few more slides. We're now in the belly of the sphere. This is the Big Bang. We're right now retooling it because we had some hardware problems earlier on with this. We're retooling what will actually happen as you walk through here. But the early universe was very hot, and very loud and very bright. And if you stand about this close, it will singe your eyebrows. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just being all serious. This is, you're in the belly. Above this is the projector and the space theater. And this is the Big Bang, the origin of the universe. Now, of course, if you're from the Kansas School Board, you can bypass this, and before we have a way for you to just not look if that's so offensive, and then we step you out onto the timeline of the universe, which is right here. This is a timeline of the universe that takes you out of the Big Bang, and you walk the walk. You watch the universe unfold in various evolutionary phases, from the beginning, the era of quasars and the structure of the universe forming, all the way on down, the formation of the solar system. And by the way, every step you take, I want to make this clear. If you unfurl this path, it's the length of a football field. You don't notice it because it does a 1.5 twist, but it's the length of a football field. So you walk it, one step, depending on how long your legs are, one step is about 50 million years. 50 million years. So you're walking this, Earth, the solar system forms about 2/3 of the way down the ramp. You take another couple of steps, life is there. Single-celled life. Life happened really fast in the beginning, but then it moves slow. It was like single cell for several billion years. So you're there, not much interesting is happening. And then we get to some more so life finally figures out how to become multicellular, and then we have some fossil evidence of that. And then we get the Cambrian explosion of life, where life then grows eyeballs and other really cool appendages, which is, oh, by the way, the Cambrian explosion of life happens about 20 feet back from the end of the ramp. Most of the complexity of life that we know today happened yesterday on this cosmic timeline. When did the dinosaurs kick in? About 10 feet back. You think of the dinosaurs as forever ago? No. That was that was less than yesterday on this ramp, about 10 feet back. Take 3 steps, dinosaurs go extinct. Take a few, well, where the hell are we? If all this is going on with it. Okay, so we keep going, and at the end of this ramp, we have mounted a single strand of human hair, the thickness of which, on this ramp, represents all of human history from cave paintings to the present day. Now you're really bummed out because we're nothing in time. See, I said it would mess with your ego here, okay? And then we offer counseling at the end of this ramp, okay? You know, people are just, no, there are some uplifting aspects of this facility. I'll get to those in just a moment. We're now in the Hall of the Universe. I didn't bring with me this is a photograph. I didn't bring with me a picture of the full hall, but above this is the sphere. The sphere is sitting above you, 30 feet above you. And we're now in the Hall of the Universe, split into 4 zones: planets, stars, galaxies, and the universe. And right now we happen to be in the planet zone, and what we've got here is a fish tank, a spherical fish tank. And that spherical fish tank contains a 1/2 ton of water. And in there we have krill, we've got bacteria, we've got algae, we've got plants, and it is completely sealed. Air and water does not exchange with the outside world. It is completely sealed, and it is its own ecosystem. And in this island, we talk about the search for life in the universe, and the search, and what kind of things you have to think about that would sustain life off of Earth. There's got to be a balance of microorganisms so that there's a cycling of waste products, a cycling of the resources of your environment. Otherwise, life forms just die out. Who knows what happened on Mars? Mars has evidence for there having once been ample water to sustain any ecosystem we can think of, and there's not a trace of it today. The dried riverbeds on the surface of Mars, no water there anymore. River deltas, floodplains, all of this is there, and there's no water there anymore. Something happened on Mars, which should make us think about our own precious place called Earth. So here we talk about the search for life in the galaxy. On the back wall, there was a day each of those panels might have been 1 panel per planet. Mars, little facts about Mars, Jupiter, but no, we're taking a whole other pedagogical approach to this. This is not a hall of facts. No. It could have been, but it's not. All right? What we did was we took the universe of facts and said, how can we distill that so that so that you can walk away with an understanding? What kind of connective tissue exists there so that we can teach you the connective tissue? Because once you have that connective tissue, you can attach things to it as you learn it later in life. Once you understand how the universe works, how many facts you memorize is irrelevant. And so those panels, we have a panel on storms, and we get to talk about the red spot, as well as hurricanes on Earth. We've got a panel on volcanism. You learn about volcanoes on Mars and the history of Mars, volcanoes on Earth, volcanoes on one of the moons of Jupiter, and on and on and on. So there are ideas that are presented, not simply the memorization of facts. I've just 3 slides left, and I'm pretty sure you'll probably all have questions, so I want to make sure we have time for that. Here we are where that surface level parking lot once was. It's now submerged 3 levels down. This is a terrace raised from the entrance level. That's why you're up above the south pole of the sphere. This will be a place for you to come, sit, eat your lunch, and in a way be intellectually seduced by that sphere. You'll see people entering the sphere, exiting it, and you'll say, I want to go inside. What we did was we de-bricked the universe to enable you to think about the universe just by walking down the street. Now, I had an idea. I don't like saying this too much publicly. No, but at the beginning of this project, we have lists of things we want to do, and not all of it ever happens. Not all of it can ever happen because of money, because of planning, because of all kinds of... One of my ideas for this, which is now on the budget cutting room floor, was to illuminate this sphere in such a way that it would be the phase of the moon, of the actual moon in the nighttime sky. So that you could sit out here, either in the terrace, we'd pick the spot, and it'd be the crescent moon, and it would be like a lunar clock. Nobody needs the clocks to chime out the hours, because we all have wristwatches today. There was a day when, of course, no one had wristwatches, so you needed the church steeple to tell you what time it is. We don't need that anymore. But you don't know where we are in the lunar month, do you? No, you don't, okay? So this would do it. You'd stroll by, say, oh, full moon today, oh, new moon today, crescent moon. And what I always wanted to do was do that, when you come into LaGuardia, there's one of those routes that comes up the Hudson and then banks a right turn. I always wanted to sort of come up the Hudson to look out the window and say, first quarter moon today, But no, at last it did not happen. It doesn't mean it can't ever happen. We've got the sphere, okay? But through our value engineering and other cuts to maintain the budget, which was $200 million in the end. Sorry, one last thing. This terrace will have fountains. They're not shown here. Yes, they are a little bit. They're little spigots, fountain spigots. Okay? And our landscape designer wanted to put those little fountains in places that had special meaning. Well, I said, sure, let's do it. And so these fountain spigots are in the positions of the stars that trace out the constellation Orion. Okay? Now, why Orion? I could give you 20 reasons why, but just suffice it to say it's a very recognizable constellation that is as visible from the southern hemisphere as it is from the north, unlike the Big Dipper, which only we in the north have a good view of. Anyhow, if you orient Orion in a particular way, then another constellation off to Orion's side, Canis Major, the big dog, falls right where the dog run is. Okay? And the brightest star of the nighttime sky, Sirius, which is in Canis Major, is right where that dog run is, and I want to put like a fire hydrant there or something. Sirius the fire hydrant. So we've got a lot of planning in here. Just a couple more slides, because I know people want to get to work. Here I am just posing. We're laying cables into that terrace, because that terrace will have internet capacity, power supply, and video hookups, so that if there's some cosmic event, we can invite the community of amateur astronomers to set up their telescopes, plug them in, so that they track the night sky, and we can actually stay on top of, or beneath of, cosmic events with telescopes out there on the terrace. So the terrace is multi-purpose. This is a Willamette meteorite put in before the whole facility was built, which was the only way that could happen because it weighs 15 tons. It weighs more than an 18-wheeler truck. And it's sitting on this pedestal into its own supports down into the ground. So it is separately supported from anything else of the rest of the museum. This worker, I don't know if he thinks this hard hat would have any effect at all if this thing fell on him. This would basically squash you like a bug. And imagine this thing falling out of the sky at 30 miles per second. That'd just be the end, This is a little video camera on 81st Street pointing to the facility that's taking time-lapsed pictures of the entire construction. And it's still there, and I have a 2-minute video that I will show you that is the fruits of the labor of that projector. And this is my final scene, my final slide, a photorealistic image. This is like taken from Tony Randall's apartment or something in the Beresford. one of the apartment buildings across the street, you could, we have one of these taken a real photo, and I don't know whose apartment it is, but it looks very much like this, except the sphere is illuminated in a soft blue rather than this amber. This was before we had settled on what color the illumination would be. But there it is with the city skyline. And when I think of myself as an urban astrophysicist, this is the kind of images that resonate with my soul. So let's go to our video. I think you just push the video button. Okay, are we ready? Thank you. Thank you for your attention. Any questions? Did I just pick questions? Yes. I think they might want you on a mic, so why don't I return this mic and I'll just stand behind the podium. You got a mic there? Okay.
Hi, I'm Richard Jordan, a trustee of the Cathedral of St. John the Divine, fond of bells and dogs. So,
Okay.
My question is this. Since the Hubble Space Telescope has a certain shelf life, I think it's another, 10 years or so,
Yeah,
what will the next generation of space telescopes be looking at? I'm sure that there are things that were discovered with the Hubble that they want to look at more and perhaps in greater detail.
Excellent question. Let me answer that question second and give you some insight into the design of this facility. As you know, cosmic discovery is a moving frontier. It changes weekly. You look at every weekday's newspaper, forget about it. I mean, it makes the exhibit designers cringe. They open up a newspaper, find out what the next discovery is, and wonder whether what you designed is out of date. Our facility is designed with layered shelf life. Okay? So, for example, where we talk about the moon going around the sun, that's etched in metal, okay? Where we talk about string theory and whether it will be the theory of everything, that is conveyed to you by a video interview of someone who is working on that frontier. So that as that frontier shifts, we'll just re-interview the person or find the next person who is occupying the frontier that he once did. And so, and in addition, in the old days, we had a bulletin board made of cork where we'd pin up the latest pictures from Hubble or the latest press releases. Nowadays, that bulletin board is made of video. We have a video wall where we have a whole staff that is charged with tooling that video board with the latest discoveries, interpreted for the public. You can go in there today and find a press release that might have been released yesterday, and with interpretation images to support it and the like. And once you have it in digital form, we can flow it through our website and distribute it to schools, other museums, and the like. So in that way, we stay current. The Next Generation Space Telescope, which in fact is called the Next Generation Space Telescope, NGST, is actually going to look farther back in time than the current space telescope could, and see galaxies as they form. Because as you look out in space, you see things not as they are, but as they once were. I don't see you as you are right now. I see you as you were 20 billionths of a second ago. And because it takes light time to reach me. Well, as you look out in the universe, it's like a geologic strata. As the geologist looks through sedimentary layers, they're looking back in time. So too does the astrophysicist look back in time. The New Generation Space Telescope will have the capacity to see farther back in time than any previous telescope. and we get to test our theories against the observations, and that'll happen over the next 10 years or so. Onward to the Big Bang, as it is. Yeah, next question.
Roger Hers, Bronx Science 51. How many children?
How many times were you mugged by, you know?
Fortunately, none.
Okay.
How many children are currently being served, both in visits and in classes, and what sort of capacity limits do you have?
Good question. There are different ways you can cut these numbers. One of them is about a third of all total visitors to the museum, to the entire museum, are groups of children either coming with schools, with camps, or with some organized program. Half of all visitors are children. Okay, so the difference between the third and the half are children who come with their parents. So it is a major place where families take their kids especially on the weekends and on school holidays. In the planetarium itself, these numbers are following through with what has they're just higher. All the numbers are higher, but those percentages are following through in about that way.
But do you have capacity constraints? In other words, successors to you today. How many are in classes and making visits with schools?
Okay, so the question is, what does the pipeline look like? It was never our particular goal to create a world of astrophysicists. That would be really boring. We need artists, we need lawyers, we need we need other professions in this world. What we really want to do is use this facility as a way to raise the science literacy of the public a notch or two. And in that way, you can become a fully participating member of the electorate when issues come up in Congress, in your community, that require some kind of logical scientific thinking. So we want to sensitize the public to science. But in addition to that, we still offer the evening courses. We still offer, the education department has whole programs where they're testing ideas and concepts with neighboring schools as a paradigm for curriculum that might then be distributed across the country. So we have ways that we're trying to get in to the base of that pipeline. And by the way, that's always been the mission of the education department. Now they can do it with the facility that relates to the universe. They had done it with dinosaur bones and the like in the past. So yeah, we've got a pipeline in motion. Yes, next question.
Jerry Spivak, a visitor to the museum about a week ago.
And I admire your tie. Show everyone your tie there. Yes, okay. Okay, good. Did this camera see his tie? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, having gone in there, I found it a totally confusing experience. Had I had this lecture in advance, I would have found it an extraordinary experience. And so I'm just wondering what might be done to just, in a very small color brochure or something, just let the people know that there's this timeline available, that there are these other things available, what it is, because it was just a collection of rooms to me, and I was in total confusion as to what it was that I was supposed to get out of everything. Although the sky show was fascinating, other things, you know, the beauty of the place was extraordinary and so on. And had I had you with me, it would have been one of the most wonderful experiences of my life.
That's an important question. We had some feedback in the first month of our previews. We had many weeks of previews. Even before much of the exhibitry was in final form, we had many previews that first month, the month of January, basically. We opened to the public February 19th. And in those first several weeks, we got feedback from VIPs, from members, and the like. And your comment was not uncommon in the feedback among people. But that was buffered with some other statements. For example, people did recognize our place in the universe, how small we are in time, in space, in size. And these were important elements that we wanted people to get out no matter what else happened. So I think we succeeded in its most fundamental level. Now, in terms of how much of the facility you can take in, I have two responses. One is, yes, we have been working on a brochure, and we have a prototype of one right now. And I'd be happy to send you one if you wouldn't mind commenting back on it to us. But how many people will actually read a brochure before you come in? Some will. Maybe you you are, but I bet most wouldn't. So really, it's something that has to be solved in situ. And so we are now working on signage, which is museum talk for sign. We're working on signage that more clearly identifies what is about to happen to you as you walk here, as you stand there, as you look there. Because otherwise, we had assumed, I think incorrectly, that the exhibit itself would rise up, bare its chest, and say, here I am. And in fact, the context was not as apparent as we had imagined for it. And so right now, this is what I spent whole meeting, half of yesterday, in just such a conversation with my colleagues, and that's a continuing dialogue with our exhibit department. So yes, we are sensitive to this. Okay. Also, keep in mind that we're bringing the frontier of the universe to you. And the idea that, oh, I've got a couple hours, let me take in the Rose Center. If you expect that in those 2 hours you're going to learn everything on every exhibit, you are wrong, okay? You are just flat wrong, all right? And so it's deceptive because it's one facility. You know, that's all one open space. You say, oh, okay, let's just do it, you know? And it's like, no. What you need to do is treat those exhibit elements as you would major exhibit rooms of a major museum like the Met. The Met, you walk into like the armor room, right? Now that's a whole thing you got to do there. You walk into the Egypt room. That's a whole thing, all right? And so you allocate time, all right? And there was one New York Times article where a woman had been interviewed having done the exhibit, and she said, well, I read the exhibit and like my brain hurt at the end. I'm thinking, yeah, okay. No, think about it. You go play racquetball, your muscles hurt, all right? And you knew that was going to happen. So, and I think back of like all the dialogue at the beginning of the project where people were scared. They said, oh, we're worried you're taking away the Hayden and you're going to turn it into a Disneyland and dumb down the science. I'm thinking, these people don't know what we're about to do here. And so it is interesting. But if you parcel it more sensibly, then you would not have that problem as much. Plus, when our signs come into place, you'll be in the mental context to then take in the facility. Looks like the hook is coming here. Okay.
That was really wonderful. I thought, though, that what I really wanted, I want to take a tour of it with you. I want you to be there with me.
Actually, we are now considering, this was not my idea, but I endorse it. Well, we are considering having a guided audio tour where, and they wanted me to do this, and I'm happy to do it, but it would be like my voice whispering cosmic nothings in your ear. No, but I would be with you at every turn, pointing out things at every turn, and then you get your own private tour of the universe. And the way this would work is I would have a microphone, and I would walk the exhibits and say things that descend upon me as emotion dictates as I journey the facility. And one way to do this is to infrared trigger it with an exhibit marker so that you don't lose track. Just wherever you're standing, it triggers the CD-ROM, and in comes the signal. So you're never out of sync. Oh, is this 18 or 17? You know. So that's another way we're considering.
This is only inside the museum, though, right? You're not going to follow us home.
I whisper to you at night. Well, no. I hope I do follow you home in a particular way. No, in a particular way. I hope that there's a phase shift in the kinds of things you think about in your everyday life. That you come out of there and realize, yes, we are small. We are but a speck in cosmic time, space, and size. But the human mind figured this stuff out. And for me, that's quite uplifting. And in fact, the chemical elements of the human body, the carbon, the nitrogen, the oxygen, is the same chemical elements that are forged in the centers of stars. This is an important message that we convey in the space show, we convey it in the whole of the universe. We're not simply in the universe, we are of the universe. And the universe is in us. We are literally stardust. And it's that kind of sort of poetic yet literal reference, that lifts me out of bed every morning and says, what's next in this universe to tackle? So
This is wonderful. Come here. We want to give you a product of the scholarship of this institution as a thank you. It's a book, Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, by my colleague Annette Gordon-Reed, and we give it to you with thanks for an absolutely stimulating and wonderful morning.
Thank you.
This concludes this year's breakfast. Thank you so much for coming. We'll start again in September.